Thank you very much for that, and welcome to all members and the committee and members of the public present to this Planning Committee virtual meeting, which is held due to the current COVID-19 restrictions on public gatherings, and we will probably be doing this for some time to come, it would seem. If I could refer members and officers to the published protocols of holding virtual meetings. Members to have their videos on at all times, but to put the microphone on mute unless you are speaking. In the case of any technical problems, the meeting will adjourn until those problems are resolved. If a member loses connection, the meeting will adjourn until that member is reconnected. And Andrew will keep an eye to make sure that we're all here. If technical problems persist and the meeting is therefore inquirate, the meeting will be abandoned to a later date, and when voting, members should state, "I have heard the discussion and I vote to grant / refuse the application." This meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be available to watch and listen on the council website in due course. So item 1 is attendance by reserved members. AJ, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chair, I'm reserving for Simon Brown.
Okay. If we just go around to make sure we're all here. I'm Councillor Keith Ferry, and I'm the chair of the committee. Gasampha.
It's Councillor Gasampha Ali. I'm the vice chair of the committee. Thank you.
And Sachin.
Councillor Sachin Shah, a member of the committee.
And Marilyn.
And Councillor Marilyn Ashton, member of the committee and the Conservative spokesman on the committee.
Christopher.
I'm Councillor Christopher Baxter and I'm a member of the Planning Committee.
And Jana.
Councillor Anjana Patel and I'm a member of the Planning Committee.
Good. Item 2 is right of members to speak. Councillor Dan Anderson has requested to speak on item 204 97 West Street, Harrow. Is that agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Don't see any dissenters. Declarations of interest have been published on the council website. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of September 2020. Are there any objections or alterations to the minutes, and can they be agreed and signed at a future date?
Agreed.
Agreed,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 5, public questions, none have been notified. Item 6, petitions, none have been notified. Deputations, item 7, none have been notified. And item 8, references from council and other committees and panels, none have been notified. There is an addendum and a supplementary addendum. Are we happy to receive those?
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Agreed, Chair.
And representations have been received in respect of application number 202. The garages adjacent to 12A Wood Ridings Close, Mr. Paul Tindley, the objector, and David Ewins, the agent. And item 204 97 West Street, Harrow, Andrew Fazakali, the objector, Suresh Vagiliani, the applicant, and as previously notified, Councillor Dan Anderson to backbench. Are we happy to receive those representations?
Happy to.
Good.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. So for members of the public, the procedure for the planning applications will be, there will be a presentation by officers. There will then be a time for questions from members of the planning committee to officers. The objectors and applicants will have 3 minutes each to give their presentation to the committee, and the backbencher will have 5 minutes each, after which there will be discussion on the application and we will vote on the officers' recommendations. So I think, as we normally do, we will take the 2 items that we've got objectors to. So we'll kick off with item 204 97 West Street, followed by item 202 garages adjacent to 12A Wood Rising Close, and then follow the order as set out in the agenda. So could we have the presentation, please, on item 204, 97 West Street, Harrow?
Yes, members, I will be presenting that. Can everybody see the presentation?
We can.
Yeah.
So this application is in respect of 97 West Street, and there has been an addendum item. 2 informatives have been added. The applicant is advised that the certificate would only be valid for 6 occupants only, and the second enforcement is to advise that there is currently an enforcement investigation in relation to untidy nature of the site and means of unauthorised enclosure, and to ensure these matters are appropriately resolved. So the site is on West Street and is occupied by a 2-storey end of terrace dwelling house on the corner of Nelson Road. The surrounding area is predominantly residential use. The adjacent neighbours are number 95 West Street and 43 Nelson Road to the rear. The site is located within the Harrow and the Hill Village Conservation Area. The application proposes to convert the property to a 6-bedroom HMO for a maximum of 6 people with internal alterations. No external alterations are proposed. Objections have been received, however, a consultation period is not required as this is for a certificate of lawful development. This assessment is basically regarding whether or not planning permission is not required. Class L permits a change of use from C3 to C4 for up to 6 occupants under Class L of the GPDO, provided the development does not result in the use of the property as 2 or more separate dwelling houses falling within C3. The council are of the opinion that planning permission would not be required for the use of the property as a small HMO for up to 6 people, as the proposal meets the requirements of the legislation under Schedule 2, Part 3, Class L of the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order 2015. The Planning Committee is therefore asked to agree the reasons for refusal as set out in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Chair, just a correction. I don't think our officer meant to say reasons for refusal. Did she not? Shouldn't she have said reasons for grant?
Approval.
Sorry, yes, it was
I
reasons.
mean, it doesn't matter, but just
reasons for approval.
Sorry.
Good. So if there's no questions,
I got one.
Sorry, Kasampha, go ahead.
Yes, Selina, just a small question. How many bedrooms are at the moment, and is the family staying there at the moment as an empty property?
I'm not aware whether or not there's a family staying there currently. There are 3 bedrooms and there are 6 bedrooms proposed in this proposal as part of this proposal.
Thank you.
Any more questions? No. Is Andrew Fazakali online?
Councillor Ferry is not attending the meeting.
In which case I will have to read out his statement for him. This is from Andrew Fazakali, 42 Nelson Road, Harrow, HA13ET. I would like to draw the committee's attention to some of the many issues of concern thrown up by this application and why this is profoundly the wrong location for an HMO. The building in question, 97 West Street, sits on the corner of West Street and Nelson Road. It is an entirely residential area with a high proportion of families with small children who attend one of 6 primary schools and nurseries close by. Like Nelson Road and Wellington Terrace, the surrounding streets are quiet cul-de-sacs and narrow crescents in which infants and young children feel safe to play. An HMO with 6 very large rooms is likely to contain 12 adult occupants at a minimum, and very probably more, given HMO's well-earned reputation for overcrowding and the council's difficulty in policing it. This property's occupants are likely to form a drifting transient population in the area, many of whom may have unknown backgrounds and personal problems. In addition, the application makes no provision at all for off-street parking, despite the likelihood of it bringing 6 to 12 extra cars and vans to an area of twisting narrow streets that are already bursting at the seams with residents' cars. The granting of such an HMO would markedly change the character, amenity and traffic load of nearby streets, risking the safety and security of a quiet, highly family-centric area that is currently trusted as a children's playground. The Planning Committee recently turned down an application for HMO change of use in Courtfield Crescent, Harrow, precisely because of the residential nature of the area. I would suggest that West Street, Nelson Road and Wellington Terrace match that definition 110%, and I urge you to reject the current HMO application on the same basis. So have we got Suresh online?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep. Okay, Suresh, you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just want to bring to the committee's attention that we didn't even need to apply for a certificate of lawful development because this comes under permitted development under the Permitted Development Order 2015. So I'm very surprised that this has been dragged to the committee's attention because actually it should circumvent the whole process, and hence it's been recommended for approval by your own planning officer. So what we want to do is bring we want to bring a building which hasn't been used for several years and is, could attract squatters and extra crime. We want to bring it to use. And there's a lot of interest from key workers, nurses and doctors who attend Northwick Park Hospital and the nearby Clementine Hospital because it fits into their affordability and it's in a close location to it. So we'd urge you, if we do have to go to appeal, we'd be looking to recover the cost incurred by our consultants and the interest cost that this process has taken. So I urge you to look at this carefully, seeing as it never should have come to committee in the first place. That's it.
Thank you, Suresh. Councillor Dan Anderson. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. This proposal received upwards of 40 comments and letters of objection, a similar level to the application rejected last year. I'd like to say at this point that I share the frustrations of residents that by submitting a general permitted development order, an instrument imposed by central government, the application has taken away the voice of local residents. And as the previous speaker said, circumvented the scrutiny and input of the local community, local representatives and local planners. I wanted to take this short time to represent the views of local residents of West Street and adjacent roads who have been rightly concerned and at the same time locked out of this process, and share planning reasons why so many feel the proposed conversion of 97 West Street into a HMO is inappropriate at this location. Firstly, it restricts road access. West Street is narrow and already experiences problems with traffic and parking. In fact, this has been taken into account with an impending CPZ zone that local residents, local stakeholders and the council have worked hard to balance and implement. This development will undoubtedly impact the traffic and parking in the area. In fact, the impact was described expertly in the reasons for why the previous similar application was rejected. As mentioned in the pack, the site is located in an area with a low public transport accessibility level, and the proposal would increase the pressures of on-street parking stress in an area that will not be possible to accommodate any extra vehicles in the immediate vicinity, contrary to Harrow Council's policy. Secondly, it's a listed building. The property is a locally listed building and located within the Harrow on the Hill conservation area. The proposal will be making significant alterations to the interior of the building, particularly the basement. Work will likely interfere with existing sewers and drainage from neighbouring terrace houses. Thirdly, residents feel that it is out of character with other development in the area. Again, this is supported by the supplementary planning document for Harrow on the Hill Conservation Area, adopted in May 2008, which mentions repeatedly that converting single dwelling properties should be avoided. The document acknowledges attractiveness of converting these, but reflects in policy 18, preference will be given for the retention of large single houses. There will be a presumption against change of use to flats and other institutional uses. And in point 5.18, It states conversions of large single-family dwelling houses can have a significant effect on the character and appearance of the hills conservation areas. Although the physical appearance of the original building may not be substantially altered, its character and the character of the wider conservation area will change. The associated increase in car movements, fencing, bins, and other features of flat conversions can have a detrimental impact. It is a shame, I feel, that these considerations are not interpreted to be relevant to the permitted development order. It is disappointing that the application has been approved on these grounds, and it is worrying for the future when national government speaks of increasing the reach these orders have even further. We've already seen the impact they have had in other areas of the borough. I would urge the committee and officers to consider these points and consider possibilities for taking a different tack. It seems obviously unfair to me that these rules are working against the local community when they would be applicable to almost every other development within the local area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Marilyn.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I was the nominated member who called this into the committee, and I did it in the full knowledge that I know that, and this has been the case through very many different governments, including Labour governments, that permitted development doesn't, the HMOs for 6 people and under only require, and it's only an option anyway, permitted development. This is not a new thing, and it's got nothing to do with any of the new ideas that have come out currently. This has been the case way back in way before the coalition government. Even it's been the case for many years. The point is this, that there are various things that the Labour Council could have done about this if it had wanted to. For starters, we are actually looking into placing Article 4 directions on various of our conservation areas. And although it won't help with this, we could prohibit HMOs in conservation areas if we added Article 4 directions to them, and that would solve the problem. The reason why we can't prohibit this under that order is because the article directions, and there are some, it's a very high level of conservation area, are only relevant to the materials used on the buildings, and therefore we can't do that. It is locally listed, the building, but local listing is very nice, but it hasn't got anything like the kind of weight, particularly in the internal structure, that statutory listing has. But I accept and have always known that there isn't an awful lot we can do about this. So one might want to ask, and please forgive me, why did I call this into the committee? Well, there is a reason why, and the reason why is mostly because I think that the residents around there have been very disappointed. Not in the fact that you can have HMOs, because we've got a remedy if this council chose to do it by expanding the 4 directions. But the reason why I called it in is because there have been years, frankly, of inactivity in respect of planning enforcement on this site. Luckily, the things that are wrong, and the main thing is that the site needs to be tidied up. And an untidy site is something that isn't time limited in the way that other breaches are time limited. And so there is plenty of time, and I'm pleased it's been put onto the addendum. If it hadn't been for me, it wouldn't have been, because I actually contacted planning enforcement and made sure that all of these unresolved issues are now resolved. And I think that it is worth putting something on the agenda of this planning committee if it ends up that things that have been neglected by this administration end up being resolved. And I think that the residents around there need to understand that it's very nice for one of their local councillors to turn up and try and score points, which is why I'm speaking in the way I am. But actually, I don't really think it will cut very much ice because there is a remedy that hasn't been done, and there are outstanding enforcement issues that need doing badly. Another thing that astonished me is that when you have a permitted development like this come forward, one would have thought, knowing that there are problems with enforcement on the site, that the planning department would, although it isn't relevant to the planning process, automatically let the licensing department know that there are issues on the site, and therefore the licensing department, who have an awful lot of control over the 6 occupants and below HMOs, when these things go ahead, they're not unlicensed, and therefore to say there is nothing that can be done is actually untrue. There's a lot that can be done if the council doesn't behave in a silo-driven concept, and if the council has more joined up between the planning department and licensing. So yes, I did call it in. I'm pleased I did. I think that notwithstanding, we can't stop unless we go through the process of adding Article 4 directions to this HMO on this spot for 6 people and under. What we can do is that we can make sure that licensing, because we are here as one borough, it's not just about the planning committee, take an interest in this and make sure that this HMO is properly managed, is habitable, and doesn't do too much harm within the locality. And so, Chairman, if I may, I accept that this can't be refused on planning grounds, but I think we've achieved something tonight in calling this to the committee and making absolutely sure that things turn out the way they should, because without this, I don't think they ever would. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Sachin.
Thank you, Chair. Don't worry, I'm not going to make a 10-minute political speech. First of all, I'm very glad that Marilyn raised the point of Article 4. It's something I've been talking about for a number of years, and I hope others will join my campaign to get Harrow to have an Article 4. If we did have an Article 4, we could refuse this application if we wanted to. We don't have an Article 4 directive in place. There is no legal planning reason why this could be refused. We just leave the council open to appeals and costs against us. So I do have sympathy with Dan. I have sympathy with the residents. I hope we can move forward on having an Article 4 directive in the borough to stop C3 to C4 without planning permission, and then we can have a discussion. I do also hope that the licensing team know this is we do have additional licensing, so this will need a HMO license, and I hope licensing are listening to that. So while I have sympathy with residents and Dan, I can't see any reason to vote against granting this certificate. One thing I will say to residents, and it came out in the speech that Keith read out, that this is for a maximum of 6 people, and we have to be, given this has come forward as a planning application, it's clear that they would want to stick to it. Otherwise, they would just not come to us at all and do whatever they want. The fact that the applicant has come and asked for a certificate of lawful development means they are clearly wanting to stay within the rules. It can only be for 6 people. I certainly hope our licensing team and our planning team are watching it. If it is more, if the residents have concerns that it's more, well, let's see if that happens. But at the moment it's 6. But Chair, I see no reason to refuse this application.
Thank you, Sachin. Are there any other comments? I don't see any. Therefore, if we can move to the vote, and I'll start off by saying that I've heard all of the discussion and I vote to approve this recommendation.
Yes.
Sampha.
Councillor Ali, I've heard and all the discussion and proceedings, and vote to grant. Thank you.
Sachin.
Councillor Sachin Shah, I've heard all the discussions and proceeding, and I vote to grant.
AJ.
Councillor Ajay Moore, I've heard all the discussions and proceedings and here to grant.
Marilyn.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussions and vote to approve the certificate of lawfulness.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Christopher Baxter, I've heard all the discussion and I vote to approve the certificate of lawfulness.
And Anjana?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant for the lawful certificate for this application.
So the recommendation to grant the certificate of lawful proposed development is approved. And we move on to item 202, which is the garages adjacent to 12A Wood Rising Close.
Can all members see the screen?
We can, yes.
Yeah, lovely. So this application is in relation to 12A Wood Ridings Close. The application site is a vacant parcel of land between existing flats and 5 lock-up garages situated to the west of Wood Ridings Close. It's within a cul-de-sac and is characterised by maisonettes to the west and semi-detached houses to the east. The site is located in the periphery of the Pinnerwood Park Conservation Area and adjacent to this section of Grimms Ditch that is designated as a Scheduled Ancient Monument. The proposal seeks the construction of a 2-storey building containing 2 one-bedroom flats on a vacant parcel of land. 15 objections have been received following the public consultation. These objections have been addressed in the officer's report in relation to character and appearance, overlooking, loss of views from the conservation area, loss of part of the Scheduled Ancient Monument, parking and trees. In terms of the principle of development, the proposed dwellings would provide an increase in smaller housing stock in the borough, thereby complying with housing growth objectives and policies of the Harrow Development Plan. In terms of the character and appearance, the proposal has been designed in keeping with the surrounding properties and would have an acceptable impact on the character and appearance of the adjoining conservation area, subject to appropriate materials which are secured by condition. Given that the proposal is modest, a watching brief during development to mitigate any impact to the archaeological asset during construction has been deemed appropriate and would ensure preservation of the adjoining Scheduled Ancient Monument. In terms of amenity, the proposal would comply with appropriate internal quality of accommodation standards as outlined within the London Plan. It is noted that there are objections in relation to overlooking to properties at the rear of Hallam Gardens. However, this will not be significantly different from the prevailing situation with regards to the orientation of the existing property 12 Wood Ridings Close and adjoining rear properties on Hallam Gardens, and would therefore not cause detrimental harm to amenity in this regard. In all other aspects, the proposal is considered to have an acceptable impact on the residential amenities of the adjoining occupiers. In terms of car parking, 1 space is provided off-street. This complies with the current London Plan standards, and highways have no objection to this. The committee is asked to grant planning permission subject to the conditions outlined within the officer's report. Thank you.
Councillor Ferry, I believe you're still on mute.
Right. Are there any questions? No. So if we, Gasamfa.
Thank you, Chair. Just enough. I mean, are these 5 lock-up garages, are they, I mean, just locked up or being used? Because they might be being used for antisocial behavior. Just want a clarification. If they are redeveloped, I think it'll be nice. Thank you.
So just to clarify that the 5 locked garages are not being redeveloped as part of this proposal. They are located to the west of the site. So it's actually the land in between the garages and the existing flats, which is 11 and 12, that is being developed. So it's essentially what's there at the moment are kind of small sheds, which are associated with the existing flats, but they're not actually in use.
They're not part of the development. I just want a clarification on that.
Yes, the 5 locked garages are not part of the development.
And who owns these garages?
I believe it's the other residents along the cul-de-sac.
Okay, all right. Yeah, just a clarification.
Any other questions? No? Okay, can I invite Paul Tinsley, the objector, to address us for 3 minutes?
Hi everyone, hello. So I just want to start off by saying that the impact's going to be more so for us as local residents. So I'm flat 12, there's number 11, there's 13, there's 14, there's also number 19 and 21 Hallam Gardens. I've got an 8-year-old son, so straight away with this building, where it's going to be erected, it's literally going to be 6 or 7 feet away from our building. That's going to block out my son's light straight away. He's already got a light-filled bedroom, and that's one part of purchase. Living here, having a nice setup for my son, and now he's going to be staring out onto a wall. I just beg to differ with all this going on. Alongside all this, I've got my kitchen. The kitchen's got the side window, the same principles. It's going to cut out all the light, and I'm going to have a building. I'm going to have a wall to stare out onto. It wasn't something that I foresaw happening when purchasing this property. Also, the lack of parking. I understand there's parking for a car, but as we all know, when properties are purchased, it's not just one. There's 93% of people are a couple that are buying flats. It's not a single occupant. It's going to be 2 occupants. And roughly, from what I've looked at in the past, 86% of people have 2 cars. So we're looking at 1 off-street parking turning into 3 cars. There's already a lack of parking on this road already, and that's really a concern for a lot of the neighbours, a lot of the residents already. There's already drives, there's already dropped curbs. So there's already a distinct lack of potential for this parking facilities for all us residents on the road, myself, my wife. Alongside this, we've also got the old oak. We all know there's a preservation order on this oak in the back of the garden. I think of number 19 Hallam Gardens. And I really feel that when this building is built, we all know the foundations. We all know that it's going to be dug, to be laid, and potentially the size of this oak and the roots are definitely going to be disturbed. That's my own personal opinion on what I've seen happen in the past with certain trees, preservations, and sadly the loss of trees. And in my opinion, I just feel that it's going to cause movement and silence. If we start disturbing the roots of an oak, the natural thing for this is going to cause movement around stability. We know that we're on London clay in these areas, so we already know that there's already shrinkages, there's already movement, and I just think it's going to have a massive impact on our house and neighbouring houses, as well as other residents in the surrounding. And that's really just what I wanted to get across to everyone, really. I just really strongly object and oppose this. I think it's been done in the past 2 years on the spin. It's been opposed. The planning officer came out to see it, and he rejected it on these grounds. I just don't see the capacity of another building in this already tiny close is going to help. I really can't see it. There's already Olympic House at the beginning of the road, and again, there's lack of parking. It just doesn't feel right.
Okay. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you. David Ewins, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
We can, yes.
As the objector said, this is the 3rd application that I've lodged on behalf of my clients to develop this site. Following the first refusal in May 2018, the design of the building was all as discussed and agreed with the planning officer, Selina Hotwani, who you've seen just now. A second application was lodged in September 2019. This was refused because of anxiety about the nearby oak. At that time, as of now, there was no objection to the design of the building. This third application has been lodged following extensive discussions and agreements between my client's arboricultural consultant and the council's own tree officer. We understand that there will be conditions on how the works are carried out and how the oak will be protected during the works, and it will be subject to very stringent control. I can only therefore say that we can see, given this, that there is no reason why the council should not approve this latest application. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Are there any comments from members of the committee? Sachin. You seem to have lost you, Sachin.
You're on mute, Sachin.
Oh, there we are. Sorry, it's a question. Thank you. I thought I'd unmuted myself. It's a question to officers. We heard from residents around the issue of lack of light coming into one of the bedrooms and the kitchen. Can you just bring out what the officer view of that point is?
Yes, so there are flank-facing windows towards the development, but both of these windows are non-habitable rooms or secondary windows, so they'll still have the primary outlook from the rear elevation. The rear elevation essentially aligns with the building line of the flats next door, so in our view, there will not be any detrimental harm to their daylight outlook.
Okay, thank you.
Marilyn.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do agree that some of the reasons for refusal that were given in 2018 was the last attempt had been addressed. But fundamentally, this is, in my view, unacceptable. And I'm very disappointed, actually, that this is recommended for grant. And I can understand why there have been so many objections from people who, you know, they do live in a very special part of the world. The site is very constrained. It is next to one of the loveliest of conservation areas. And quite frankly, I have to say I'm very disappointed that this is recommended for grant. And so therefore I'm going to propose refusal. The proposal, by reason of its siting and mass, would represent an overdevelopment of a constrained site and would be detrimental to the character and appearance of the area, and would be unduly prominent and bulky in the street scene, and when viewed from the rear gardens of adjoining Cullen Gardens, contrary to policies 3.4, 7.4 and 7.6 of the London Plan 2016, policy CS1 of the Harrow Core Strategy, and DM1 of the Harrow Development Management Policy Local Plan 2013, and the adopted supplementary planning document Residential Design Guide 2010. And I do hope that others on the committee realise how damaging this would be and vote to refuse it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Anjana.
I would like to second that. I'm not actually going to repeat myself, but I feel the same way, that this is a very tight site, and I don't think this is an appropriate development for this place, and especially when the application has been refused previously. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjana. Does anybody else wish to speak? Sachin.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I've certainly heard the comments of Marilyn and the resident. However, I'm also acutely aware of the huge housing targets this council has, and a big part of the housing targets that we're enforced on us. This is not something that we've set. Enforced on us includes a small sites section, and in that small sites, this is exactly the type of land that is expected for the council to build on. And if we don't hit our targets, we can lose our rights to give planning applications at all. So while I have sympathy with the residents and Marilyn's reasons for refusal, I don't feel I can support those, and Chair, I will be voting against the reasons for refusal and voting to support the application.
Marilyn?
Yeah. Well, I hear what Sajin says, but the one thing that he has to bear in mind, and I know he knows this, because he's a knowledgeable person on this subject, very knowledgeable. That is that each application must be judged on its own merit, and on its own merit, this application is completely unacceptable. I'm sorry, you know, you think this is really, if you don't grant this, going to mean that will be taken over under special measures and that our planning department won't be able to make decisions. I mean, with all due respect, Sachin, even I know that you know that's nonsense. With, you know, I despair, actually. And I'm going to repeat this one more time. I would very much welcome it if this could be refused. I think it's a sustainable reason for refusal. I think it would do well at appeal. And I repeat, I would be extremely disappointed if were this to be granted. And I do hope that at least some members of the ruling party of this council will listen to what I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Anjana?
I may be repeating myself, but are we not supposed to be actually looking at each application and not looking at how many housing we require in the borough? So we just go ahead and improve the housing units. So we just go and say yes to something. I'm sorry, I do disagree with Councillor Shah on this, and I think every application has to be looked in on its own merits and how it is going to impact the residents around and the house next to it. And that's how I understand that we are actually determining the applications here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's no other comments. If we move to the vote, we have a motion to refuse. I've heard all of the discussion and I vote against the motion to refuse. Kasampha.
Councillor Glenfally, I've heard all the discussion and proceedings, and I vote against the motion to refuse. Thank you.
Sachin?
Councillor Sachin Shah, I've heard all the proceedings and I vote against the motion for refusal.
AJ?
Councillor Ajay Morrow, I've heard all the proceedings. I vote against the proceedings.
Marilyn?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussions and I vote in favour of the motion to refuse.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Christopher Baxter, I've heard all the discussion and proceedings and I vote for the motion to refuse.
Anjana?
Councillor Anjana Patel, I've heard all the discussion and I actually vote for the motion to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. By my reckoning, there were 4 votes against the motion and 3 votes in favour of the motion, so therefore the motion to refuse fails. If we can move on to the recommendation to agree the reasons for approval. I don't think we have to say that we've heard all the discussions twice. I vote to grant this application.
Councillor Glenfally, I vote to grant the application. Thank you.
Sachin?
Councillor Sachin Shah, I vote to grant.
AJ?
Councillor Ajay Morrow, I vote to grant.
Marilyn?
Yes, I vote to refuse. And who's being political now?
And Christopher?
Councillor Christopher Baxter, I vote to refuse.
Anjana?
Councillor Anjana Patel, I vote to refuse.
Okay, so that's 4 votes to approve the application, 3 votes to refuse the application, so therefore the application is approved. And we move on to 101 Harrowview East.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. Can you just confirm whether you can see the presentation?
Not as such yet. Yes, we can now.
Okay, so just take members through the addendum first. Please note that this slide has actually been superseded by the addendum that was sent round to you yesterday, I believe. There are a couple of items on it. The first one is the amendment to condition 11 to remove the words "where practical" from the condition to make the condition tighter. The second addendum item is a change to recommendation A as reported in the officer's report so that it meets the standard wording that Harrow Council uses. There's also a third item that was brought to officer's attention today. Informative number 6 references a Harrow SIL payment of £12 million. This is an error, and we propose to remove that reference from informative 6. I'll just take members through the rest of the presentation. Bear with me. So this is Harrowview East plot C2B, which is in this location here. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the construction of one industrial unit, use classes B1C and B8, and associated parking access, parking and landscaping. Plot C2B, as you can see, comprises the northeastern corner of the wider Harrowview East master plan area, which until recently accommodated a series of buildings that form part of the former Kodak factory complex. I'll take members through the slides. The proposal is the employment unit here. You can see the proposal. This is a floor plan, ground floor plan, with Magnolia Place to the rear here. This is a roof plan of the proposed building. You have the proposed elevations, front and back, and then the 2 side elevations. The scale of the proposed unit has been chosen to reflect what is anticipated to be the most attractive to the type of tenant sought. Originally, it was thought that the design of the building could comply with the approved height parameters of the outline permission, but this would have resulted in a building that would not be suitable to the market. Notwithstanding, it is only part of the rear pitch of the building that slightly exceeds the approved height parameters. The rear of the roof on Unit 1 will rise to a maximum of 2.9 metres above the 8 metre maximum parameter height. The eaves height, as it adjoins the neighbouring resident gardens, complies with the parameters. The rear of the roof has a shallow pitch and rises gradually, meaning that the exceedance of the parameter gradually rises up to a maximum of 2.9 metres at the pitch of the roof. Given that this pitch rises gradually, there will be no additional visual impact from the residential properties on Magnolia Place. The external appearance of the building has been designed to respond in a manner that is in keeping with the emerging commercial and residential context of the Harrowview East site. If I just talk members through the slide you can see on your screen now, the red line that you can see around here shows the maximum parameters approved under the outline permission. So what the applicant could have done is to propose a building that effectively follows this red line. So it would be closer to Magnolia Place here. This is the boundary you can see, and it could be quite considerably higher in this portion here. The proposed building you can see here is the yellow block you can see with the grey outline. So as you can see, it is quite considerably close, further away from the boundaries with Magnolia Place here. It's 6 metres from this boundary, and then the closest point of the houses on Magnolia Place are a further 9.5 metres away. So it's actually 15.5 metres away from the rear of this wall. In terms of the impact on 9 Magnolia Place, which is the closest residential property to the proposed scheme, the daylight sunlight analysis shows that the proposed scheme has a lower development angle, as you can see from the slide in front of you, than the consented maximum parameters at massing and that of the existing buildings pre-demolition. Therefore, the impact on this property when compared with the parameter plan will be considerably less. And for the For the reasons summarised, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Matt. I've just got one question. You did bring up the subject of SIL.
Yes.
All of these industrial units were put in the master plan in order to compensate for the loss of employment that followed on from the demolition of the Kodak headquarters. As far as I understand it, SIL is only payable on an increase in floor space. So my question is, has the floor space that was originally occupied by the Kodak building either been subsumed in the Barratt development, or has it been, should it be applied to these industrial units?
I believe that in this particular instance, when you take the entire site into context, it has exceeded it, I believe, and I believe that the floor space has been used up by the Barratt development. So this is an exceedance of circa 1,500 square metres. That's why it is a Merrill SIL liable, which is not Harrow SIL liable. There isn't actually a liability for these uses under the SIL charging schedule for Harrow SIL.
Right, so the GLA SIL at just after about 6.5 million, that still applies? For this particular development of circa 1,500 square metres, the actual Merrill SIL for this portion of the development on its own is £93,780. And that will include, that will plus any change in terms of the tender prices index. As of when. Okay. All right. Marilyn.
Yes, thank you. I've got a simple question. Now, I understand what the building would be, but are there any actual prescriptive hours of use as to how many hours this building can be used for? I might have missed it, so apologies if I have, but I did read the report very thoroughly and I couldn't find it.
I believe that the hours of opening are not in the outline. Let me just double check. Bear with me, Councillor.
I didn't think they would be.
No, because we don't know what the exact use is absolutely.
I'm concerned about that, you see.
I think in terms of the hours opening, I believe we could probably add a condition with the hours that councillors see fit to restrict the hours of use, bearing in mind it is a light industrial use and a B8 storage and distribution use. So we can obviously have appropriate hours as you see fit.
I'd like to propose that we do that actually to save a bit of time. I haven't actually come up with a definitive number because I'd like some consensus. It would be nice to have some, make a change in this committee. I'm assuming that this would need to be open at some point on a Sunday. Matt?
Yes, in terms of operating, a self-storage place would usually open on a Sunday for some element of the day.
All right, so we can make that, say, just for argument's sake, 9 till 4, which is not unreasonable. It's what sort of time shops can be open. But the storage place, because people would want to gain access to that. You don't want to be unreasonable. And maybe during the week, we could make it, say, 7 till, say, I don't know, 9:30 or 9 o'clock at night, maximum. But I stand to be corrected. I'm not an expert in this type of use, but I just think that what we can't do is leave it blank. Because if we do that, then we're going to end up with people, frankly, they hold us to account over that. At least they'll have some certainty about when things are supposed to get quiet there. I don't know what my colleagues think, but I think 9 till 4 on a Sunday and 7 until 9 maybe, or even 8 until 9 at night, Monday through Friday. Would that be too generous or too unreasonable? Somebody help me out. Beverly, go on, you help me out.
I was just going to comment that the uses being put forward are in a B class, and the B1 use class, which is the light industrial, is by definition a level of industry that can exist next to residential properties without detriment to the amenity of those properties. It's within the definition of the B1 use class. So if it will give members a little bit of comfort that this isn't heavy industrial that's being proposed here, nor is storage. However, I think the hours that you suggest are entirely reasonable.
Yeah, but that's what I was thinking. I mean, I if you make it any more stringent, then it could be challenged. But I just think that if there's lots of people that are worried about this, and I understand, except I do think this is an improvement on the outline indicative parameters. So it's not actually bad news at all, given that we are where we are. But at least if we put the hours of use on, there's more certainty for people around. Even if it makes no difference, it's comforting, as you quite rightly say. So I'd like to propose that. Thank you.
Kasanfa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, Matt, just my question is, what's the access road to this unit? Is it going to through your Harrow East development?
Yes, I'm just going to share again, just to show you, Councillor. It's going to be the road that's already approved. It comes through the estate, but it's this map doesn't quite show the whole thing, unfortunately. But it's the existing road. So this particular development doesn't actually approve the access road itself.
You can see the road on page 20 of the agenda. It's the road with the trees around the outside of it, and that comes directly off the roundabout on Harrow View. So,
thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just need a bit of clarification here. That's the road.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sachin.
I agree with Marilyn that putting some times behind it is a good idea. I think probably 9 o'clock is a bit too early. Maybe suggesting shutting it at 10 o'clock at night is probably a fair time to say you close it.
I think on the question of hours,
I'm quite happy with that.
We could leave it up to the officers to discuss. They've heard what we generally think about the hours, and we don't want to make the whole development because those hours would also apply to all the other units 2 to 11, and we want to make sure that we don't make the whole thing unviable because of half an hour here or half an hour there. Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to second Marilyn's proposal to add a condition to this. I think, even if it, as Marilyn says, doesn't make any difference in actuality, I think it's just important to try and do our best to guarantee minimising disturbance to residents, at all hours of the day. So if we can.
Yeah, Manjana.
I just like to say that I think we need to discuss the hours. We can't just leave it all up to the officers. We need to suggest the hours, and they can then go and talk to the developers about it. So I suggest that yes, we do decide on hours ourselves here, and then they can go and communicate that. Thank you.
Chair, sorry to interrupt, but with respect, I don't really think that's what I meant. What I actually meant is opposite to what our chairman has suggested. I meant that those hours would be a condition attached to the permission.
Yeah, I take that. But
yeah, that makes
what has been discussed?
Just be.
Let me speak, Marilyn.
Yeah.
Marilyn.
Yes, of course, Chair.
From the discussion, we've decided that reasonable hours would be 7:30 to 10 o'clock during the week and 9 o'clock till 4 o'clock on Sunday. And I suggest that officers take that away and talk to the applicant on that basis. If the applicant says that they've got a use that they require 24-hour access 7 days a week, then we ask for that to come back to the committee. Anjana.
I haven't put up my hand, sorry.
Oh, Beverly.
Marilyn.
What I would suggest is in line with what Councillor Ferry has suggested, as the applicant hasn't had the opportunity to look at that. I think the hours are reasonable, and as I previously said, up until 10 p.m. Monday to Saturday and at shorter hours on Sunday is reasonable. However, I would like the opportunity to take that back to the applicant. If they don't agree, I agree with Keith, we bring it back to the committee, but I will ask you to delegate authority to me to confirm those hours with the applicant and issue the decision on that basis should the applicant agree with them. Otherwise, bring it back to committee.
Christopher? You're on mute, Christopher.
Apologies. I was just wondering if it would be possible anyway to have Councillor Ashton's condition that she's proposed and I've seconded put to a vote.
No, I think the way that I've suggested is the best way forward. This is an application by the Big Yellow Storage Company, and it would probably be a storage warehouse. Their terms of business would probably be that you can have access to your storage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But if I'm wrong in that, the hours that I have proposed will be put by the interim chief planning officer to the applicant. If the applicant is unhappy with that, then they will come back to us to look at. So on that basis, if we can move to the vote.
I propose, please, that we put it to the vote, if necessary, that we put it to the vote.
Yes.
Because I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying, but you need to understand what I'm saying.
All right. Would you like to propose the hours, Marilyn?
Yes. As was suggested as being reasonable, on a Sunday it would be 9 till 4, and on the rest of the week it will be 7 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And I'd like to put that to the vote, that we agree that here. Clearly, it goes without saying that if that's problematic, a condition can always be varied, not written in stone, but that's what I would like this committee to say it wants. It's entitled to do that. I don't know what the problem is.
Well, my view is that we should give the applicant the opportunity to say whether that will affect the viability of this. And if it does affect the viability, then to come back. So we will take a vote on the basis of your proposed hours. And I've heard all the discussion, and I vote that the course of action should be that the Chief Planning Officer would go back to the applicant with those hours, and if agreed, a condition should be applied. If not, it should be referred back to this committee. Marilyn, I'm in the middle of a vote.
I know, but I'm curious to know what he says.
Cassandra, do you agree with what I've just said?
Yes, Councillor, I agree with the chair, and I think we should give it to the chief officer, and if they don't agree, they should come back to the committee. Thank you.
Sachin?
Yes, while I agree that there should be some conditions, I also accept that none of us are experts on storage, and therefore the exact timings might vary. So I agree with the chair's proposal that while the general discussion is taken on board by the Chief Planning Officer, and a discussion with the applicant should now be held.
AJ?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ajay, I exactly agree with what you just said and what just Sachin said. So I'm happy to proceed on those basis.
Marilyn?
Yes, Chairman, I would like the hours to be suggested to the applicant by the committee as a condition attached to the permission. And in the event that there is a problem with what this committee has decided to do, the applicant can vary the condition.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. I vote in favour of Councillor Ashton's condition to be applied to this.
Anjana?
I also agree with the Councillor Ashton's proposal that she's put forward, that there should be a condition with the timing that she has suggested, and if they disagree with it, then it should come back. But I agree with Councillor Ashton's also.
Right, so I think by a majority of 4 to 3, the committee is happy with the procedure which I set out. So we can move therefore on to the vote. I've heard all of the discussion and I vote to approve this application. Kasampha.
Yeah, Councillor Ali, I've heard all of the proceeding discussion and vote to grant.
Sachin?
Councillor Sachin Shah, I've heard all the proceedings and I vote to grant.
AJ?
Councillor Ajay Maru, I've heard all the proceedings and I propose to grant.
Marilyn?
I've heard all the discussion and I vote to abstain on the basis that I can't see any reason why we can't have the hours as suggested and can be varied. Thank you. I'd like to be recorded and as that reason. Thank you.
Christopher?
And also because of the residents around there.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. I have heard all the discussion and I vote to abstain for the same reasons as Councillor Ashton.
Anjana?
I also have heard all the discussion and I vote to abstain for all the reasons that Councillor Ashton said. And obviously, I have said that if it's if you can't attach that condition, then we should all be recorded that what we have said.
The whole meeting is being recorded. So by a majority of 4 to 0, that application is approved.
Chair, in the minutes.
And with 3 abstentions. We can move on to item 102, Central Depot Forward Drive.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interrupt?
AJ is raising the hand. I don't know why.
AJ, yes.
My apologies, Chair. I should have declared an interest being a councillor for Kempton West, where the forward drive is. There's a non-peculiar interest, so I just wanted to put this on the record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just because you're a ward councillor.
Thank you, members. May I just confirm that you can see the screen?
We can.
Thank you. So item 102 relates to the Central Depot in Forward Drive, Harrow. The application before Planning Committee this evening is for an application to retain a temporary modular building for use as 2-storey office accommodation, which basically facilitates the works to the existing accommodation on site, whereby the existing site is being redeveloped for new offices and parking, and the existing workforce has been decanted into the building. So the slide in front of you now just shows you the footprint of the building, which is in situ, and the rear gardens of the properties on Cullington Close at the back. There is approximately a 30-metre distance between the building itself and the backs of the houses. The gardens are between 20 to 25 metres long, and there is about a 5-metre gap from the back of the fence to the building itself. The slide here just shows you the extent of the scale. It's 2-storey, and there are some photographs. The application, in terms of its principle, is considered to be acceptable. It facilitates the relocation of existing office uses, so there are therefore no adverse highways impacts over and above the existing. The building has been in situ for roughly 18 months so far, and permission is sought for a temporary application for an additional 18 months to permit the redevelopment of the site to be completed. We sent out 29 letters of consultation to neighbouring consultees, and we have received no responses to date. The committee is asked to grant planning permission subject to the conditions, including the imposition of a condition that would require this building to be removed after 18 months. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions? Are there any comments? Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. I believe we had this same building before us at the Planning Committee on the 22nd of July, and I'm just slightly concerned, or I want some reassurance really, that it will sort of go this far and no further, sort of something temporary, then given a temporary extension and then another temporary extension, ends up feeling, could end up feeling surprisingly permanent. And I don't want us to be in this position in just under 18 months' time. So if we could have some reassurance that this A is enough time and B it will be taken down at the end of that 18 months.
Beverly.
Chair, if I might come in, following briefing where I gave reassurances, I again spoke to both to those officers who are dealing with the depot site to seek reconfirmation that 18 months is the maximum time and there won't be a further extension, and I have been reassured that that is the last extension they will be seeking, and 18 months will be it. So you can be reassured on that point.
Sachin.
Thank you, Beverly.
You're on mute, Sachin.
Right, sorry, I'm getting used to this new machine. Just a question around the fact that the original temporary permission lapsed in March, and what the council's view is in terms of why we've now waited 6 months from the original one lapsing to this being granted. We've just had assurances that 18 months is enough. Well, it could lapse in 18 months and still go on for another 6 months after that. So why have we allowed this to go without planning permission for a council's own site for 6 months?
As originally submitted, the council did put in an application to retain the existing building. Unfortunately, due to the timing of that application, it couldn't be seen through, hence the need for a fresh planning application at this point. So there has been, since the time it expired, there has been discussions and ongoing work towards getting this application to committee. It is unfortunate that the wrong form of application was originally submitted and we had to restart the process. That is unfortunate, but it hadn't gone on unduly without with the permission unexpired.
Had our planning enforcement officers been in touch prior to the application being submitted?
There was no need for that because there was already the dialogue about the application being submitted, so there was no need for us to raise it as an enforcement issue.
I'm just getting that on the record for other enforcement matters that I'm dealing with. But as you're now saying, if you are subject to a discussion about another planning question, there's no enforcement action. That's the council's position.
If we are confident that an application will be submitted, it is good practice not to pursue enforcement. We will nevertheless reserve our right to take enforcement action on any site if the dialogue isn't productive.
Thank you. I'm glad we got that on the record.
And there is a written protocol for enforcement actions that states that as well. Marilyn.
Correct.
Yes, I get the impression that this was an unforeseen error rather than a conspiracy. I don't think anyone meant not to do this, but obviously it would have been better if the person that applied had filled out the right form. Is that correct, Beverly?
Yes, that's correct.
And you also have to remember that the application expired on the 27th of March, and there were a few other things on our mind at that time. Okay, if we can move to the vote then. I've heard all of the discussions and I vote to grant this application. Gasanfa.
Oh, sorry, Ali, I've heard all the discussion and proceeding and vote to grant.
Sachin?
I've heard all the discussion, I vote to grant.
AJ?
Councillor J. Murray, I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant.
Marilyn?
I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant.
Christopher?
Councillor Christopher Baxter, I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant.
And Jana?
I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant.
So that application is granted unanimously, and we move on to 103, 33 to 39 Lowlands Road.
Good evening, members. Can you see the presentation?
We can.
Thank you. So this application relates to the redevelopment of 33 to 39 Lowlands Road. A supplemental addendum was issued today, and that included some alterations to some conditions, and to clarify that
It's
today.
flashing the picture on the screen. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of how that's still flashing.
Is it?
Well, it doesn't matter. It's just it's a bit psychedelic.
Okay, I'm sorry, I can't seem to change that. So an addendum was issued today, and also the addendum clarified that today the applicant has increased their affordable housing contribution by an additional £110,000. So that brings the total contribution to £460,000. And also, since the publication of the committee report, the applicant submitted a management plan to demonstrate how such a form of accommodation would be managed during the COVID pandemic. I'm sorry, it's still flashing. So the application site is a triangular piece of land. It's located within the town centre boundary and the intensification area. A railway and the town centre is located to the north, and we have Roxburgh Park and the Grove Conservation Area located to the south. Here are some photographs. And this is the proposed kind of image of the building. So the new London plan introduced the co-living style of accommodation, and the policy recognises that co-living developments can provide a housing option for single-person households who cannot or choose not to live in self-contained homes or HMOs. There are no national or local policies in relation to this typology, and therefore the assessment is carried out in relation to policy H16 of the Draft London Plan. The policy specifically states that units should be comfortable and functioning and should not comply with the technical housing standards. The proposal complies with all criteria provided within H16. Whilst the proposal would result in the loss of 50 square metres of office floor space, there are other planning merits. The proposed accommodation would provide a new form of accommodation of which the Mayor of London supports within a sustainable location. The site is within a transitional town centre location with larger commercial buildings to the north and east of Lowlands Road and lower scale development to the south, with the public highway forming a clear visual break. The building is of an appropriate mass, form and scale, and is of a coherent and contemporary design, which will make a positive contribution to the street scene. The Conservation Officer and Urban Design Officer raised no objection to the development. The proposed development would provide a good standard of accommodation with access to a variety of communal areas. The building would be managed and a laundry service, concierge, etc. would be provided for residents. The type and location of amenity spaces have been designed to facilitate interaction, and overall the internal design quality is high and would provide a good standard of accommodation for future residents. The buildings located to the north are approximately 50 metres away with the railway intervening, and the buildings located to the south are 17 metres with Lowlands Road intervening. The building would be 7 stories high adjacent to the neighbouring 5-storey building and has been designed to ensure it would not encroach a 45-degree splay. The proposal would not have a detrimental impact to residential amenity. The site has a PTAR rating of 6B and is within walking distance to Harrow and Hill Station and to all the facilities located within the town centre. The proposal includes the provision of a new access to the north of the site and the provision of 124 cycle spaces and 3 accessible spaces. Highways raised no objection to the development subject to a Section 106 agreement to ensure it is car free. With regards to affordable housing, the council appointed a third-party consultant to review the applicant's financial viability report. It was concluded that, subject to some alterations to the applicant's assumptions, including the reduction in build cost, reduction in operational expenditure, a reduction in the developer's profit margin, and an increase in rents, the scheme would still generate a deficit of nearly £400,000. The applicant has used our consultant's assumptions to calculate the potential late-stage review contribution using the GLA's methodology. The scheme would generate a surplus profit of approximately £230,000. The GLA's SPD states 60% of any surplus profit is to be shared with the LPA. This equates to £138,000. However, following negotiation and discussion with the applicant, they initially increased the offer to £350,000, which would be payable upon commencement, and today they have confirmed they would pay an additional £110,000, which would be payable upon first occupation. So the total affordable housing financial contribution would be £460,000. The applicant's methodology for the GLA is as per the GLA's formula, and the assumptions are as per our consultant's advice. It is noted that the same approach was previously considered acceptable when planning permission was granted for the collective in 2018. The proposed development is considered to comply with all national, local and so I think I just lost my signal there. Yeah, the proposed development complies with all relevant planning policies and is recommended for grant subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Marilyn.
Yes, a question, and then if I may, I'd like to make a comment. On page 87, when in section 2, the description of the proposal, it says it's a 9-storey building, and then it says use class sui generis, but it isn't that, is it? And you said it was 7 stories. Just need a bit of clarification.
So it's 7 stories adjacent to the neighbouring building, and it steps up to 9 stories.
Ah, so it's 9 stories high, right? And why does it say sui generis? I mean, if it isn't.
It's sui generis. It doesn't fall within a particular use class. So policy H16 of the draft London plan clearly states that co-living units should not be C3 self-contained dwellings.
All right, I understand. Okay, so that's kind of, yeah, because the way at our briefing, I hadn't quite understood that. I'm grateful, thank you. I have got a comment to make, but I'm happy to wait for the other questions and come back, Chair.
Thank you. Kasantha.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question, not a question, but comments. I think this kind of developments will help young professionals and young people working locally, and particularly the nursing staff in Northwick Park Hospital, and they'll be very beneficial to these young professionals, and easy access to London if they're working there. And if somebody's working from home nowadays, it will also be helpful. So I strongly recommend this kind of developments in future. Thank you.
Sachin.
Yes, I have a question around the affordable, and it's not a surprise because I've been in conversations with officers about this. So the council commissioned its own work to look at the viability. That's dated August, and that essentially showed while there is a profit, a substantial profit, it isn't sufficient to pay for affordable housing. At the time the report was written, an offer was 200,000. As of Monday this week, when the applicant wrote to the committee, it was 350,000. As of 10:04 this morning, when Katie, you emailed me, it was still 350,000. And as of right now, it's 460,000. So I just want to understand around how the changes happened. I mean, the increase of 110,000 between at some point after 10:04 this morning and was it about 4 o'clock when the addendum was published. How did that come across? How did that come to the council? Did the council pick up the phone and say we want more? And if they did, what was the basis of that, given the report that we are using is an August report? Did the applicant just pick up the phone and say, actually, we're going to offer more? How did we get to that number?
So the maximum reasonable is the £138,000 based on the GLA's methodology. However, the applicant has offered additional monies. So when the collective was granted in 2018, that was for 222 units, and there was a financial contribution of £977,000, which on a pro rata basis is £4,401 per unit. So as that methodology and approach was previously considered to be acceptable for the collective, the applicant increased their offer so that on a pro rata basis, it would be £4,423 per unit, which is obviously, just £22 difference between what was considered acceptable for the collective.
So as of the changes of today, the applicant just picked up the phone and increased the offer. It wasn't the council asked for it.
No, I received an email this morning to confirm that the applicant had agreed to increase their offer, like I said, to match what was previously considered to be acceptable for the collective.
Right. Well, it's gone up in sizable numbers from essentially saying there's no viability shows there's no affordable to 200,000 a few weeks ago, to 350,000 a few days ago, to 460,000 a few hours ago. And the question I've got, and I'll be interested in this discussion, is can we go higher? We desperately need money for affordable housing. I accept a scheme like co-living does not lend itself to on-site affordable, and I think that's right. I don't think it works. I think the development is really good. It takes a place that is just incredibly shabby and turns it into a nice site. I see we've moved quite a lot. What more can we do to move further? I do feel 460,000 is still a bit low.
So we're in terms of our justification to request for that offer to be increased, officers don't feel as though we have that justification, because the methodology for how they've calculated the late stage review is as per the GLA's methodology. So we can't question the methodology itself. And with regards to the assumptions, including estimated rental growth and build cost inflation, all of those assumptions are based on our consultant's advice.
Okay.
So, like I said, anything above and beyond that £138,000, that is what they have offered, and it would be very difficult for us to justify that additional money. When the initial offer came through of £200,000, we did have a number of conversations with the applicant and the agent, and we did manage to secure an additional £150,000. Like I said, it would be very difficult for us because we don't have the tools to justify requesting any additional money.
Thank you, Chair.
Just a point, Katie, is this affordable housing and viability review subject to a further review at 85% occupation or not?
So the offer that they've made is in lieu of a late stage review.
All right. Okay.
So based on the methodology and the assumptions, they've calculated what a late stage review could potentially capture, and that's the £138,000. So they have increased that amount by an additional 322,000.
If I might interject there, that is the exact same approach that we took with the collective on Palmerston Road last year.
Right. AJ, do you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, apart from this particular development with the co-living, do we have any other ones that have we've done this, or are we looking at any more of these? Because this seems to be the normal fit for these young professionals nowadays in the borough.
I'm not sure I got all of that.
So planning permission was granted for the collective in 2018. And obviously we have this current application, and I believe there's a current application for a co-living scheme at Greenhill Way. So in a previous iteration of the Draft London Plan, an applicant would need to demonstrate need for this type of development, but through the examination in public, that criteria was removed. So applicants no longer need to demonstrate need for this. They just need to demonstrate that, you know, the rooms themselves are functional and comfortable, that, you know, there's a management plan to secure the ongoing management of it, you know, that there's suitable communal amenity spaces, etc.
Sorry, Chair, through you. My question was also, do we have any other sort of developments or projects like these that we've looked in the past or looking at at present, or is this the one of its kind for the co-living?
No, we've had the collective, as Katie said. We had the application for Trinity House, which was part HMO, part co-living. We've got this application. We've got an application, I believe, on Greenhill Way for the Greenhill Way North car park, which is under review at the moment and will be coming to the committee sometime. And I believe there's quite a few other projects for co-living in the pipeline as well.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Katie.
And Jana, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I actually wanted to find out that obviously this is a project which is new to Harrow, and from the questions that has been answered about how much the calculation and up till the last hour the offer has been increased, do you really think that it is appropriate for this application to be here now? The second question is that this is no way an affordable housing for co-living, or maybe I would call it a high-class HMO kind of development is how I see this. So do you think that it is an affordable development that we are proposing in Harrow, that all these doctors and nurses, which is just suggested, will be able to afford to live in this kind of accommodation? Because from what I understand from the briefing, it could be 3 months or whatever, like timing that people would live in this accommodation is what I understood, if that is correct.
Do you want to answer that, Beverly, or Katie?
Katie, go ahead.
So one of the criteria of policy H16 is that the co-living units are not let for a period of less than 3 months. So with regards to affordable, I mean, it's not an affordable housing product, but it is a product to provide, you know, a greater housing choice and a different type of accommodation. And the policy recognises that, you know, not everyone can afford to, or, you know, chooses to rent, you know, a 1-bedroom flat or a studio or a HMO. And, you know, it recognises that, you know, this type of accommodation, you know, it will suit, you know.
Right, Marilyn, did you have a comment?
No, sorry, my other question was not answered about the funding, the money side of the calculation side of it. What your expert is suggesting and whatnot.
I think we went into that with Sachin in quite some detail. Marilyn.
Okay. Are we ready for it? I'm sorry, Chairman, you are being quite rude. and want to move on, but I think I should be allowed to speak. Yes, I am a full member of this committee. So I'm just asking a question. My question was, are you ready for this application to be here today? That's all. To the officers, thank you.
Absolutely. We are here to look at applications which are being put in. And they have to be done under a certain time frame, and therefore it's for our consideration this evening. Marilyn, did you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Chair. Look, it's obviously very nice when you have planning gain or commuted payment, or whatever you want to call it, in lieu of this accommodation not being designed or targeted at affordability. I don't know much about it. I don't think any of us do. I think it's an experiment. I think the jury's out on it. It may well be a roaring success, or we may end up with a white elephant of a building that's an absolute failure, and end up with some ghastly HMO or hostel or something really horrible that won't actually serve us very well at all, and won't be anything like this. Who knows? And we'll have to see. I am not actually going to say that I disagree with this kind of concept, because we have no data, particularly at the moment, or not very little data, to see, you know, in the midst of time, how this kind of concept will pan out, whether or not it will be popular and viable, or whether or not, in the end, it sort of doesn't really meet the requirements of young professional people, that they really want more privacy. And actually, in the end, as I say, we end up with something that is undesirable, frankly, in a position like this. My main concern about this is the actual structure. And I accept that there's some tall buildings in the area, but it's a matter of opinion always. These things are very subjective, but I dislike the design. I think it is rather brutal. I don't think it's attractive, and particularly so that although there is a road in between it and the conservation area and it and the local listed buildings, we're not talking about a massive dual carriageway. We're talking about a normal road. And I think that this will have quite a negative effect on the conservation area. And as I say, you know, if this is not a success, then all we'll end up with is a building that, in my view, doesn't do this area justice. Therefore, in spite of all the generosity and all the increase in offers, which, as you can hear, hasn't exactly impressed me that much, although I'm not saying that we don't need the money, we do, but we've got to get this right. And I think that this building is unacceptable, actually. So I'm going to be proposing refusal. The proposal, by reason of its scale, mass, and unsympathetic design, would be detrimental to the setting of the Roxburgh Park and the Grove Conservation Area. The locally listed group of buildings sited opposite the proposed development, contrary to policies CS1 Harrow Core Strategy 2012, the London Plan 2016, policies 3.3 and 3.5, Draft London Plan 2019, Policy D1, Harrow Development Management Policy DM6 and DM7, and would not preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the Roxburgh and the Grove Conservation Area, contrary to Policy 7.8 London Plan 2016 and HC1 Draft London Plan 2019. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anjana? You're on mute, Anjana.
I would like to second that motion. Thank you.
Okay. Beverly, has this been through the design review panel?
Katie, can you pick that one up, please?
Yes, so when the applicant first approached the council with regards to a PPA, there was a resolution to grant planning permission for the adjacent building to be redeveloped for a 7-storey building, and subsequently planning permission was refused because we couldn't secure the Section 106 agreement. So when they had started designing the building, it was in the context of, the 7-storey building adjacent. The proposal did go through a design review panel. This was just at the start of lockdown, and the DRP raised some concerns with regards to the height of the building. Subsequently, the planning authority had appointed an urban design officer, and who was subsequently involved in the design process. Officers have always maintained that the site can accommodate a 7 to 9-storey building. There is a clear kind of visual break between the buildings to the north and to the south, and you do have higher density and taller buildings to the north and east of Lowlands Road. Our conservation officer was heavily involved in this project during the pre-app, PPA and the planning application, and was satisfied that the proposal would not have a detrimental impact to the character and setting of the conservation area and the local listed building. The applicant has carried out a small number of some modest changes to the design of the building. One of those was replacing a proposed green kind of brick, which was proposed around the windows, which was to kind of pick up the green detailing of the locally listed parade opposite. But what we didn't want was, for the building to compete with the locally listed parade. So we have, like I said, we've done some modest design changes to improve the fenestration and the materials, to make sure that the design is coherent.
I think it's probably important to note as well that the building next door was refused solely because of a failure to agree the final 106. The principle of a building of that scale was considered acceptable by the committee and is still considered acceptable should they resubmit and get the details of the 106 finalised. It would be something that we would be supporting. So in terms of the scale, it has had previous support.
Marilyn?
Chair, I'm very, very fascinated to hear all this, but I disagree. And, the fact is that we have a conservation area opposite, we have a locally listed parade opposite, and meanwhile the application wasn't granted, although I hear why, but nonetheless it wasn't. Therefore, we don't have to necessarily inform ourselves of that. And anyway, this is 9 stories. And I think the design is, frankly, unattractive, uninspiring, and highly damaging to the character of the area. That's my view. I propose refusal. Been seconded.
Okay, we'll move to the vote then. We have a motion for refusal. I'll start off. I've heard all of the discussion and I vote against the motion for refusal. Kasantha.
Councillor Ghazanfar Ali, I heard all the discussion and proceedings, and I vote against the motion to refuse.
Sachin.
Councillor Sachin Shah, I've heard all the proceedings and I vote against the motion for refusal.
AJ.
Councillor Ajay Maru, I have heard all the proceedings and I vote against the proposal.
Marilyn.
Yes, I've heard all the discussions and I vote in favour of the motion for refusal.
Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Christopher Baxter, I've heard all the discussion and I vote for the motion for refusal.
Anjana.
Councillor Ranjana Patel, I have heard all the discussion and I vote for the motion to refuse the application.
Okay, so by a majority of 4 to 3, that motion for refusal falls. So if we move on to the application, again, I don't think we have to say that we've heard all the discussion. So I vote to grant this application. Kasampha?
Councillor Ghaffar Ali, I vote to grant. Thank you.
Sachin?
Councillor Sachin Shah, while I have serious concerns about the payment, the contribution to affordable, which I think is too low, my concern is a refusal on that basis would not be sustainable on appeal. So I support therefore I'm voting to support the application.
AJ?
Councillor Ajay Maru, I support the application.
Marilyn?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I vote to refuse the application.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. I vote to refuse.
Anjana?
I vote to refuse the application.
Okay, so far a majority of 4 against 3, that application is granted. Is 201 withdrawn, or are we looking at it?
We're requesting that it is deferred so that we can fully address the additional comments made in consultation. We'll bring it back to a future committee.
Okay, shall we move on to 203 then?
Members, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this relates to 9 and 11 New Road. The application relates to 2 properties located on the eastern end of New Road, currently occupied by 2 two-storey detached properties. The southeastern boundary of the site adjoins Sudbury Hill Plainfield, which is designated as Metropolitan Open Land within the London Borough of Brent. New Road is private and unadopted road, which is accessed via Greenford Way. It is proposed to demolish the existing detached properties at numbers 9 and 11 New Road and to construct a 2-storey building with habitable roof space, which would consist of 8 flats. There are 3 relevant planning applications to note at this site. Permission was initially granted on the site for 4 terraced houses with habitable space in 2017, habitable roof space. 2 applications were then recently refused to provide 9 flats, and they were refused on the basis of poor internal quality of accommodation, inadequate refuse storage, poor quality of frontage, and failure to demonstrate highway safety and flow on the site area fronting the site. The most recent refusal also added poor architectural detailing and design to the refusal reasons. The current application is considered to overcome those reasons for refusal. In terms of the principle of development, the proposal would contribute to the borough's housing stock. Policy H2 of the draft London plan supports well-designed new homes on small sites such as this and reinforces the need for small sites to contribute to meeting London's housing needs. Accordingly, both adopted and emergent policies support sites such as this for residential use. In terms of character and appearance, the size of the proposed building would occupy a similar footprint to the existing detached houses at 9 and 11 New Road and that of the approved scheme. The proposed design is relatively simple within the mixed context of the area, but would provide a robust and cohesive finish to the building subject to appropriate detailing, which will be secured by condition. The proposal would have an acceptable impact on the character and appearance of the area, addressing previous reasons for refusal regarding character. In terms of amenity, the proposal would meet all London Plan minimum standards and provides a high quality of accommodation. The proposal would have adequate containment within the site, and although there is a marginal interruption of the 45-degree display when taken from number 7 New Road, it is considered that the small breach of the 45-degree would not be significant and would result in a satisfactory impact on the occupant of number 7 New Road and would not have a detrimental impact on the residential amenities of the adjoining occupiers. The proposal is in a PTEL 4 location. 4 off-street parking spaces are provided. The Highways Authority has no objection and also considers the level of cycle parking to be adequate. The Planning Committee is asked to grant planning permission subject to conditions. Just to note, there have also been no consultation responses received.
Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Are there any questions or comments? Marilyn?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Chair, look, this is, for all intents and purposes, other than the fact that it's now flatted development, this is, unless I've got this wrong, more or less the same building as it would have been when it was Terrace House. And on that basis, yeah, speaking personally, I think it would have been better if that had been kept that way. But I don't have any difficulty with this. I think it's a reasonable development. I think it would have been better if we'd have had a little bit more parking, but I can understand why we haven't got it. And partly it's because, not just because of policy, because otherwise you're going to end up with the front looking like a car park, which is partly why it was rejected previously. So I get that. But overall, I'm quite content with it. Thank you, Chair.
Good. Okay, if we can move to the vote then. I've heard all of the discussions and I vote to grant this application. Gasampha?
Councillor Gasampha Ali, I heard all the discussion and I vote to grant.
Sachin?
Councillor Sachin Shah, I've heard all the discussion, I vote to grant.
AJ?
Councillor Ajay Maru, I've heard all the discussions and I vote to grant.
Marilyn?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all of the discussion and proceedings and I vote to grant.
And Jana?
Thank you, Chair. I've heard all the discussion and I vote to grant.
Okay, so that is unanimous and that application is granted. We don't have any other business, so therefore...
Chair, excuse me, Chair, before you conclude the meeting, on the matter that was deferred, there should be a vote like we did at the last meeting when a matter was deferred.
Okay. On item 201, I'm happy to defer this application. Sachin?
As much as I'd like to see what would happen if we voted not to defer, I will vote to defer.
Councillor Gasampha Ali, I vote to defer. Thank you.
AJ?
Councillor Ajay Maru, I vote to defer.
Marilyn?
Actually, I think the officers can take the application off the agenda, in which case we don't need a vote, but the way they've done it, we do actually. So I agree that we should defer. It's not a problem.
Christopher?
Thank you, Chair. I agree that we should defer.
And Anjana?
Thank you, Chair. I agree to defer this application. Thank you.
Good. Is there any other business? I don't see any. Therefore, the meeting concludes at 20:23. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank
Bye.
you.